Good morning. I'm Terry Brooks with Kentucky Youth Advocates, and we want to welcome everyone to this press conference and forum event. As you know, today we are releasing the 2021 state data book as part of our Kids Count initiative. My guess is that 98% of you know this, but I want to make sure we're on the same page. And that is that Kids Count is a national initiative from the Anna E. Casey Foundation, which is the philanthropic arm of UPS. For more than 3 decades, the Casey Foundation has worked on the premise that what gets measured, what gets changed. And so every June, the Casey Foundation, working with a state affiliate in each state, KYA is it for Kentucky, releases a national report, which fundamentally is a scorecard for the well-being of kids in every state. We in Kentucky try to coordinate that. And, frankly, we tend to look at things like, where do we rank compared to other states? Currently, the good news is we are no longer in the 40s, but we're in the mid-30s. That's progress, but you have to ask yourself the question, since college basketball kicked off just last night, what would happen if certain basketball teams in the Commonwealth were rated in the bottom third of all Division I programs? We would not be very happy. And yet that's exactly where Kentucky's kids are on a national basis. Today represents the opportunity that we use every November to do a state data book. And we take all of those national data points and we disaggregate them down to a county level, because we know it's important to know where we rank nationally, where we rank as a Commonwealth, but we also want to make sure that legislators and citizens are able to bore down and find out what's going on in their specific community. Where do we rank compared to other places in Kentucky? What's the trend line looking like? So those are sort of the framework of what we do. But we also know that giving legislators, state leaders, and citizens a book of numbers is not going to mean anything. Not going to mean anything without palpable action that can be taken. And I was struggling a little bit, frankly, to think about how to give an overarching message today. And I heard it. I heard it this weekend from a sermon delivered by Dr. Mark Batterson, who is the pastor of National Community Church, which is literally in the shadows of Capitol Hill in Washington. And Batterson talked about that in the rabbinic tradition of Judaism, the word for to know is the same word as to act. The word for to understand is the same word as to take action. In other words, ethically, you can't know something and not act on it. You can't understand something and not take action. That's the call today. Last year, we began to explore the intersection of the pandemic and disparities. This year, we have dug deeper into the issue of disparities. And let me be very clear. When I think about disparities, there are a range of elements that we could focus on. You can't possibly talk about disparities in Kentucky and not think about disparities that emanate from the zip code. I mean, geography plays a role. You could look at the lens of disparities in the state of kids in Kentucky from the angle of economic well-being, because you can take economic resources and track health outcomes and education achievement. That would be another approach. This year, however, we wanted to face head-on the issue of disparities caused by historic and systemic issues connected to the color of a kid's skin. And what we tried to do was to elevate how all kids in Kentucky are doing, but we want to be really upfront and talk about what we know the data says about racial disparities. And we believe that accompanying that knowledge has to be action. Now, our guests today are going to talk about those kind of issues from a range of angles: economic well-being, education, health, and family and community. But let me just lift up one example to make sure you know what we're talking about. Let's take the issue of childhood poverty. I have long presented the hypothesis that unless and until we address childhood poverty, nothing else is going to move. That is the catalyst. I mean, it affects health outcomes, it affects education achievement, it affects family safety. And the good news is that the overall pattern for child poverty in Kentucky is improving. And we need to take a moment and celebrate that. But the sad fact is that that is not an even movement. So for instance, not only do Latinx and Black kids have a higher level of poverty, that is exacerbated significantly if you live in urban areas. If I am an African-American young person in Jefferson or Fayette County, I have more than 2 times the likelihood of living in poverty than if I am a typical Kentucky kid. Now, we can talk a lot of rhetoric and we can make a lot of excuses, but that is a fact. And it is a fact that should compel us to take action. The good news is that we have elected leaders in Frankfort, 2 of whom are joining us today, who absolutely get it. And we face an abundance of opportunities. For instance, knowing the demographics of poverty, what would happen if the General Assembly decided to tackle predatory lending? Because we know that payday lenders locate like cockroaches in areas of color in those urban centers. Or what if our federal delegation got behind that child tax credit to extend it, a major lever to address childhood poverty? And what if our General Assembly decided to enact a state level child tax credit? Because we know that not only lifts families, it lifts local economies and actually helps the state budget. What if we decided that a real economic barrier around childhood poverty, especially for communities of color, was childcare? And we really began to think about affordability and accessibility. So the list goes on. My point, I hope you get, is talking about data without an ethical commitment rings hollow. Talking about data and ethical commitments without pragmatic policy movement also rings hollow. So we want you to hear today as the introduction. Now, next Wednesday, and we'll post links, you're going to be able to dig more deeply into data. Again, we'll have community partners and members of the General Assembly joining us next week, and we'll get you information on that. But let's move on with the program, and let me be very clear. The important work at hand today would not be possible, flat out would not be possible, with a number of groups that support us. You see those on the screen. Cozair Charities, Charter Communications, Anna E. Casey. But the signature partner, the signature supporter of Kids Count in Kentucky is Passport Health Plan. Ron Sadler, who is their CEO, is joining us today. And Ron, welcome, and we'd invite you to bring some comments from the Passport perspective.
Thank you very much, Terry, and I'll be brief here, but I just want to tee up this by saying, Terry, how much I appreciate the opportunity to contribute to this effort and to this cause. It should be known by all of the viewers just how much great work you and your team do. I'm proud to be a part of it. And so thank you again for the opportunity. My name's Ryan Sadler. I'm the plan president for Passport Health Plan by Molina Healthcare. And again, proud to sponsor the 2021 Kids Count County Data Book. We have a long tradition at Passport of serving the Medicaid population in Kentucky and currently serve more than 325,000 members across the Commonwealth. And approximately 43% of our members are children. So we have a vested interest in improving the lives of all of our members, but especially our children here in the Commonwealth. With decades of local and national expertise, Passport is committed to improving the health and the lives of all children in Kentucky from end to end. Not just in Jefferson County, but certainly where many, if not most, of our members are living now. Our approach is built on the whole person, wellness, and strong locally based care philosophy of serving members, that medical coverage is the foundation to health, particularly for children. And we are committed to ensuring that all Kentucky families and children receive the quality health care they need and deserve. And it's Kentucky Youth Advocates that's helping make that happen. We're all here together, committed to this mission of helping children live happier, healthier lives. And it's an honor for us to be able to do our part in that effort. We're proud to support Kentucky Youth Advocates and excited to work together with partners across the Commonwealth to build a better tomorrow for our children. So again, thank you, Terry, and please keep up the good work.
Thanks, Ryan. I also want to give a shout out to Nicole Yates, who is on screen. Ryan and Nicole are kind of like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid for Passport when it comes to community engagement. So thanks, Nicole. Thanks, Ryan. We appreciate you being here. You know, I want to contest what is a typical narrative that we hear about Frankfort. We so often hear that nothing can get done. There's such polarization and toxicity. And on some issues, let's be real, that's true. When it comes to kids, we find the antithesis of that. I've got to tell you, my experience with House and Senate leadership, minority and majority members, rural and urban members, says that when it comes to kids and when it comes to families, common sense, common ground, common agendas percolate in the halls of Frankfort. We've seen that with fundamental reforms in child welfare and juvenile justice, education accountability. The list can go on. So I want to encourage you not to buy the narrative that we need to give up on Frankfort. And instead, I would suggest the opposite. We need to bring thoughtful, imaginative, full-bore agendas to our legislators, because I believe that we have a consensus when it comes to the importance of kids. And wow, two voices that we have joining us today exemplify that commitment. Senator Gerald Neal and Representative Killian Timoney are here today, and we have invited them to bring remarks both around their view of sort of the state of Kentucky's kids. And my guess is, not trying to write their scripts, but you're going to hear them encourage you to reach out to your legislator, to share ideas about kids. And I want you to listen to these two gentlemen, these two leaders, with an ear to know that I believe both of them are committed, absolutely committed, to moving the needle for kids in the Commonwealth. Senator Neal, you have a slight edge on seniority, and so I'm going to start with you, and then Representative Timoney, when Gerald does his amen, you pick up and go, okay? Thank you so much, Gerald and Killian. I know you've got busy schedules, and we're humbled that you're here today. So, Senator Neal, take it away.
Well, first of all, thank you for the invitation for this morning. And also, Terry, I always look forward to working with you and celebrate the work that you and Kids Count's doing in the state and around the country. It's very essential. It's very important. I equally want to celebrate the support you get from an organization like Passport. You cannot do what you're doing unless you have those individuals that are in the business of and get it in terms of what needs to be done, not only from your particular standpoint, but understanding what that means to what they do. And they get it. So I want to give a shout out to Passport with respect to that and our two friends that are here this morning. Let me also give a special shout out to Representative Timoney. I always look forward to interacting with my colleagues, even when they're across the aisle, and even when they're across, I guess, from the Senate to the House as well. So, so I think we have the right attitude about how to deal with things, and I think that lays the foundation for us to be able to address tough questions. As opposed to internalizing them, but to really look at them from how do we get from A to B to Z, and agreeing on what that vision might be. So that's very important. You said something very important here. I'm so glad I've never heard this before, but I love it. I'm gonna start using it every time I get a chance to, and that is to know is to act. My goodness, how can you know something and not act upon it, particularly when you know it needs your attention, is something to do? I'm particularly interested in the fact that you, and I know your history, Terry, and your organization, that you have this focus on disproportionality. We must address structural deficits in our systems associated with disproportionality with regard to race and ethnicity in our health, education, juvenile justice system, child and foster care system, et cetera. As it relates to the legislature, some people feel that, well, we elect people like myself and Representative Timoney and go get that work done. But actually, it's the engagement. It's engagement of people, ordinary people every day that get impacted and affected, have opinions, have input, have power, in fact, of engaging the system that gives us the leverage to do what we do. In fact, it fires us up to do what we do. So, yes, we want to extend, I'm sure Representative Timoney joins me in this, we want to extend a robust encouragement of all individuals to deal with us in a very direct way, indirect way, et cetera, whether it seems positive or negative. I am really interested in what you all do because of the data connection part. Without data, without information, you don't know where you are. You don't know where you are. And guess what? You don't know where you can go or should go. So you're doing something very fundamental here. And in fact, in every aspect, I guess if I talk to my passport friends here, they'll tell you they're constantly in the business of data collection because they don't only do it, but they do it again and again and again. They keep doing it because things move. It's not like things are static. It's very important to do what you're doing here. Kids Count and the others that are focused on these issues. But we have to be intentional about this. This data collection is important. We must acknowledge the racial and class disparities and address them head on. I like that. You use that word, Terry, head on. We should not equivocate in any way. And the legislature has a particular responsibility in that regard in terms of how we do policy. Don't get me wrong. It's very complex what we do. People come with different varying opinions. It's hard to get on the same page sometimes, but you made a good point. When it comes to children, when it comes to the welfare of families, we're talking. We're always talking, and we're trying to do something in this area. But there are other things that affect what we're talking about that become more difficult for us. For instance, we know that fundamentally the question that underlies all of this is poverty. It's where you are. It's all these other things that create challenges that make it difficult, not only for a child, but the whole structure that the child lives in, the family, the community, et cetera. So we know there's a disproportionality as it relates to that. So why not should there be a disproportionality in outcomes? I get a little concerned sometimes when I talk to some of my colleagues and they do not understand that there are systemic forces that operate that dictate, in many instances, our outcomes. In fact, we all are living within systems. You don't go up to a stop sign or a stoplight and just disregard it. In fact, it not only is something that you respond to, it's something that actually molds your behavior going forward. All systems do that. So why should we not understand that if we do not intentionally deal with the disproportionality and the deficits in our system, that we cannot change these things, or they will stay the same unless we do that. So to do that, we need this data collection, but we need education on structural racism and implicit racial bias. We need that. We should not skirt these issues. We have bills before the legislature where people actually feel it's more important to censor or limit information, our truth, our history. That is not the way to go. But it gets you into the complexities of how people view their role in reality and what they think is important. But I go back to the word intentionality, because intentionality between governmental, nonprofits, and community initiatives that are coordinated to strategically attack all aspects of disproportionality is what we need here. We don't need to be operated in silos. We need to find each other. We need to coordinate what we do. We need to leverage what we do. We need to learn from what we do. And we need to be very intentional in what we're trying to do with respect to that. Those are the things we must do. Otherwise, we're going to have 3 steps forward and 2 back, which we experience quite a bit. Current policies and practices should be re-examined. We shouldn't just make a policy, and this is a note for those who function in the legislature itself. We shouldn't just make a policy and get on to the next thing. What we should do, given the fact that we know that we're not getting outcomes in many aspects of our society, we must re-examine what we've done. And in fact, I've introduced a couple of bills. I'm hoping that the legislature will pick it up. I'm certainly going to reach over there to Representative Timoney. I'm sure a man of his girth and intelligence would grab right onto this. But as it relates to racial bias, there's a bill out there now that I have that I'm trying to, a couple of cycles have gone by, we're trying to get them to deal with that. There's some, it's catching a little ground there in terms of healthcare disparities and so forth, the same thing. So we want to know the impacts of the policies we make. Keep in mind, we're policymakers. Someone else carries these things out. So, but once we put those policies in place, which can be the root of all evil, or it could be the bedrock of positive outcomes, we have to be careful. We must re-examine this. So we're going to be doing that. I'm going to be urging that. Our foster care agencies must address disproportionality and disparity within the foster care system through recruiting more foster families of color, and also making sure that their focus is community-based and informed. I think that's going to be very essential and something that we'll be pushing this time around as well. And finally, we must provide robust supports for those that are impacted by the challenges associated with poverty. I keep going back to poverty. We must begin to re-examine how we prioritize and distribute limited funds, and how we coordinate that with other entities, whether they're governmental or private, in a way that we create the leverages that are necessary to do a more effective job. So again, I want to thank Kids Count for its work. I'm gonna shout out to Passport one more time, because I got a long history with their work. I've seen it over a period of time, and we're looking for their continued engagement, as well as Charter and COSAIR and those that have a long history in our community with respect to that. And I want to encourage you all to stay strong in the struggle, and I look forward to working with Representative Timoney and others going forward.
Thanks so much, Senator. Again, if you have been tuning into the House the last couple of sessions, including the special session this last spring, there is a consistent and clarion voice for kids. And we are glad to have that clarion and consistent voice here today. Representative Timoney, take it away.
Well, Terry, making me follow Senator Neal is not fair on any scale and any scope. The next time you ask for me to speak, I'm going to have to ask, who are you bringing in as the main event? Because it is impossible to follow someone of his stature. Senator Neal and I have worked on, we've had some conversations in the hallways, and he's highly respected in Frankfurt, as well as with myself. I've been able to reach out to him on several things. So it is always a pleasure to work with him, and it is an honor to be even put on the same stage with him. Terry, thank you for asking me to be a part of this. And I can't thank the groups enough that are involved with today. Mara was really great about getting the information. So, kudos to her for that. My background as a public school teacher, I knew very early in my career that I was very early in my life that I wanted to work with kids. I'm the second of 6 kids. Mom and dad moved over to the United States from Ireland. I'm first generation American. So my perspectives on, how things worked in this country were probably unconventional. I know I was using phrases and terminology in elementary school that my classmates wouldn't understand because they were, cultural references and those types of things. And I also, and I'm going to fess this up, and I'm glad my mom's not watching, but my cousins taught me all kinds of profane words in Irish, so that whenever I get frustrated on the playground, I would utter something that no one would know. So I guess that was a benefit to having that avenue. But to get to the point, when I took a look at this 2021 Kids Count data book, I'm a data geek. My last year as a teacher in Fayette County Public Schools, I got to teach a class. It was called AP Human Geography, and it advanced placement, so that it was very high level and it was very rigorous. But it was the study of humans. And throughout that class, I learned as much from the kids as I learned more from them than they did from me that year. But one of the things that we looked at were the different facets that lead to a rich, and I don't want to use the word successful, because there's 330 million Americans, and and there's probably 330 million different definitions of what success means. But I think you guys kind of know where I'm going with that as far as what they want out of life. And we would talk about all those different factors. And the one thing that we came back to as one of the main contributors to the conditions that people live in was life expectancy. And I know you're going to want me to go in the direction of education because, it's very important, but I think this all plays in at a macro level. I think that this plays into it. When you talk about life expectancy and you look at the countries that have the highest life expectancy, you can make several general assumptions that are most likely going to be true about their conditions. Access to healthcare within 5 miles, access to museums and libraries, medical care, absence of fast food restaurants within proximity. All of these different indicators, you're like, that's really kind of unique. But I think that all plays part in this. Obviously, I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into education. The education pieces were very important to me because I was a high school teacher, I was an elementary assistant principal, and I was a middle school assistant principal. And across all demographics, I worked in affluent schools and I worked in high Title I poverty schools. So it was, when I bring my perspective, it's a K through 12 across the demographic spectrum to the conversation. And there were several things that that I noticed in working at the North End Lexington schools that were very, very beneficial to the Commission on Race that I was appointed to during the interim, and how economics and education are tied together. How I would ask students, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" And I knew what I wanted to be when I was probably a freshman in high school. I knew I wanted to be a teacher. Not all kids do. Heck, my little brother didn't know after his 4th year of being at UK what he wanted to be. So there's no rhyme or reason there. And that's not an indicator. But basically, by me asking that one question to a student who was identified as living in poverty and who identified in a category that would definitely be considered marginalized or underrepresented, I don't know, was the answer. And I'm saying, I don't know is perfectly acceptable, but let's talk about what you want out of life. Let's talk about where you want to live. Let's talk about let's talk about all of these things that you want, and let's build a pathway to get there. And those conversations need to be happening today. They need to be happening today. And college isn't for everyone. We do not have enough money invested in our career and technical educations. Our vocational programs, there's still a stigma attached to those programs. There's still, well, you can't handle it in regular school, so you go to vocational, and that's going to be good for you. Well, the reality there is we don't have kids who might very well be exposed to a career that they could be the next Elon Musk. electrical engineering, or they could open a car dealership. They could be the best of the best, but they're not being exposed to it because we're not putting enough attention there. And I bring that up specifically, and we're dealing with the disproportionate number of minorities that are in poverty. Those are the categories of students that I'm talking about that could definitely benefit from this. There's so much in there. There was so much in that data book. I spent probably I probably spent 2 hours going through it page by page. I know that when I saw it, I had a lot of aha moments as I was going through that book. So the effort and the energy that your group put into this, thank you. I will be using this moving forward. I will be using this regularly. I will be referencing it regularly as I'm moving forward with the school system and in Frankfurt. Definitely the Commission on Race needs to have access to this, just to see it in a data perspective. I also appreciate the historical perspectives that you put in there, reference points over time to show either a positive change or a negative change. I thought that was very effective, and I think that's important. We need to be looking at those things. I know I've spoken in a bunch of different directions. I want to express my support. I also want to commit my passion to this project, and I care very deeply about kids, and I care very deeply about working across the aisle with kids, because I think as Senator Neal had indicated, these issues are ones that demand our attention right now, and we can make progress. And we invest in our kids today. We're gonna reap our harvest later. So I think that's one of the big things that I'm thinking about. How can we do things correctly today so that our future is brighter? And we're saving lives here, people. At the bottom of the line, at the end of the day, we're saving lives. And that, our government is the purpose of our government is to protect our life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And life being first. Our founding fathers were very intentional with putting that there. And this is a direct avenue towards that. So again, I'm going to wrap up with just thank you for being part of it. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. And I look forward to working with this group moving forward.
Thank you so much, Representative. And I'm really happy that you didn't use any of those Irish cuss words on this press conference. The other thing I want folks to know as a compliment to the representative is he, working with Senate leadership, is actually helping us bring forth a policy agenda explicitly up front, tackling racial disparities. So we've had some beginning conversations, and I appreciate his courage in owning that kind of an agenda. So Representative, we're going to look forward to working with you and your colleagues on that. Well, we can't talk about the state of kids in Kentucky without talking about key on-the-ground partners, as well as young people who are going to talk about their own experience. Joining us today are some vital voices that we want you to hear. I don't know if we have a more active partner than Karina Barillas from La Casita Center. She also is competing with one of our other guests today, I think, for most frequent appearances on KYA forums. So Karina, it's always great to have you. And I know you've brought Anita Rodriguez to give a youth voice on this as well. Eltuan Dawson is a member of the peer network of True Up, which is built upon making sure that we give young people aging out of care a voice. And Eltuan, you have joined us many times and always bring a great perspective. We're especially happy as well to have Dale Robinson, who's co-founder of the Wanda Joyce Robinson Foundation. And he's going to bring a fascinating perspective from a dad's view. And finally, we have Shamitha Kuppala, who is a proud North Oldham Mustang. And we are so happy to have the Mustangs and you here today. So what we're going to do is sort of the run of show is we're going to start with Karina, and then you're going to hear from those folks in sequence. And then I'm going to take just 60 seconds to wrap this up after we have heard from that North Oldham Mustang representative. So Karina, take it away.
That's me.
There you go.
There.
Well, good morning and buenos dias to everyone. Very happy to be here. My name is Karina Barillas, and I am very privileged to be with La Casita Center and very proud to be a Latina Kentuckian.
I'm Anita Rodriguez. I'm a current Latina teen at La Casita Center.
Well, as Terry shares, when we measure outcomes for kids, we can change outcomes for kids.
We're tracking the well-being of Latinx children and youth in Kentucky, and it can help our community and our state leaders better understand how they're failing to address challenges that serve as huge barriers to the success of our youth. The Kentucky data book shows there's Latinx kids and youth in every county, from the smallest and the most rural to the biggest and the most suburban communities.
So the amazing work to prepare and make our data book a reality and to include the voices of Black, Brown, Latinx, Indigenous, and immigrant communities and communities that are minoritized and marginalized shows the intentionality to represent all the realities for all the children. During this process, La Casita brings to the table the stories of the suffering and the struggle of Latinx and immigrant children, their experiences in a system that is learning to be welcoming as we speak and that needs systemic transformation. We bring the voices of Latinx families with children and youth with special care needs and the issues that affect not only Latinx children, but Latinx families in general that have to face systemic racism, oppression, and marginalization.
With Black and Latinx families disproportionately impacted by racially targeted housing and discriminatory practices are actually more likely to experience housing instability. This was highly aggravated by the pandemic that's going on. During the pandemic, about 30% of Latinx families were at risk of just not being able to pay for housing compared to about 18% of white families. Also, income losses during the pandemic resulted in a lot more families needing food assistance, and historically disparate rates for children and people of color were heightened. In 2020, about 20% of Latinx families experienced food insecurity compared to 13% of white families. Regarding education, I know personally, I immigrated to the United States when I was 5, and I was just in time for kindergarten, and I don't believe I was kindergarten ready. I wasn't really provided any special, not special, but any extra additional help that I needed as someone who hadn't been familiar with the English language. Other than snarky remarks about my English or my lack of English, I wasn't associated with anyone of my culture or anyone in the Latino community. I worked hard to get where I'm at. I'm a current junior at DuPont Manual High School, and that's a really big achievement. I have my parents who worked multiple jobs with being provided little to no assistance in language. They were just, it was on them and it was on us to get to where we are. That's why I strongly believe that with additional services, we can help future immigrant children and families have a much smoother transition into the American life.
And thank you, Anita, for bringing those topics. It's very important for us to know that this pandemic has been an X-ray of the inequities as well as the suffering of all the children that have been minoritized and marginalized. So we can see in the case Anita was talking about food insecurity, we have seen places where supposedly are sharing food for everybody and families that are being forced that they are here in this country legally and being asked for their ID to provide food for their children. That is appalling in this state of Kentucky. We also see that, unfortunately, when we talk about education and Anita talking about how difficult it was for her being kindergarten ready, there are not systems out there that really accompany families and understand the struggles of families, because usually the systems and the procedures and the protocols that are being put out there are being created for other communities that do not represent us. Also, some of the things, and my amazing friends from KYA, and Terry, how much I admire you and your team, that I've always been sharing all the research and data doesn't really reflect what the Latinx community, the immigrant and refugee community is really facing, because we are not asking the community. We might be asking those ones that have access to language and have access to digital media, but not the ones, the poorest of the poor, the ones that are really in the need. So it is very important that we as a community start looking at our children, at all our children, and try to understand what our children are facing, all of them.
And I strongly believe as a community, if we invest in what children and youth need and tailor additional support for them to face their barriers, we can end up in more, I'm not going to use successful, we can end up in a much better place. The majority of childhood immigrant families live below the poverty line, but additional support can include language support, helping to navigate the school system for new parents, for parents to immigrant children in America. Increasing their sense of community, not only in school, but outside of school as well, and providing services to help with immigrant and refugee trauma. Culturally relevant programs, I believe, have the biggest potential to make education a lot more meaningful to students and their families, not only as a sense of community, but also just to tailor services more specific to immigrant and refugee needs. Each Kentucky kid will have a brighter future regardless of their racial or their ethnic background.
Mm-hmm. Well, and just to summarize what we are trying to share with you all this morning, and based on the data book count that we are sharing today, it is very important to say that targeted outreach to Latinx families in cultural and relevant ways could address barriers to health coverage enrollment and alleviate parents' concerns on whether immigration status is impacted. Data also suggests that Latinx families will benefit from targeted and culturally relevant outreach to improve access and utilization of telehealth services, which were a critical resource during the pandemic. Our community deserves investment and opportunity. We are worthy of investment and opportunity, and of real inclusivity, where Latinx children issues are relevant from the get-go, not as an afterthought or to check the diversity box, but because if every child in our community thrives, everyone thrives. Muchas gracias for being with us this morning.
Yes.
Thank you. Eltuan, you are a veteran at these events, so I'm just going to turn it to you and ask you to take it away.
I am Eltuan Dawson, and I am a True Up Peer Network member. In 2011, Frank Harshaw founded True Up to better support foster youth across Kentucky. True Up is a community initiative designed to empower young people with lived experience to gain critical skills needed to make successful transitions from structured environments to self-sufficiency in our community. Using lived experience combined with trauma-informed approaches, True Up Peer Network members are responsible for mentorship and advocating on behalf of foster youth and young adults. When I was 6 years old, I was removed from my mother's home for neglect, but that was just a claim because my mother did everything she could to provide for me and my 5 siblings. We were not being abused in the home, but I've learned that abuse sometimes looks like not having support for electrical wiring because my mother could not afford an electrician while doing her best to feed and clothe me and my 5 sisters. I'm not the only young person who has been removed from a biological parent because of lack of community support. And with that being said, it is a pleasure being here today to express the importance of this data book release. The Kids Count Data Book is the start to making efficient improvements in helping communities in every county to modernize necessary changes needed to be made in Kentucky's child welfare systems so that all of our young people have an opportunity to elevate and thrive. Moving forward, my recommendations are for community partners to continue this research and continue to collect data and use that data to improve programming, resources, and services. If you are a young person, I strongly urge you to get involved and allow your voice to be heard that way also. The time is now for changing Kentucky communities, and we are starting with this generation, and so we celebrate. I want to give a super huge thanks to Senator Neal, Representative Timoney, Kentucky Youth Advocates, Kentucky Kids Count, NEEKC Foundation, Passport Health Plan by Molina Healthcare, Cozer Charities, and Charter Communications. Thank you for listening.
Eltuan, thanks so much for your voice. Dale, so many people talk about how you're rocking it, so we're anxious to hear from you.
Hey, hello, how y'all doing? My name is Dale Robinson, and I am the founder of the Wanda Joyce Robinson Foundation. You know, I spent 10 years in federal prison, and now I'm a gym owner. I own a gym called Guru Fitness. I am the author of The Making of the Guru. I'm a professional speaker, a mentor, but most importantly, I am the co-founder of the Wanda Joyce Robinson Foundation. We serve youth that's been impacted by incarceration. We was formed in 2018 inside of a Starbucks with me and Amy Nance and Krista Hudson. You know, we didn't really know what we was doing, but my thing is done is better than perfect. Let's just get started, and we'll figure it out along the way. So since then, we have created 12 programs, which sustained through COVID and all. And like some of the highlights that we do for our kids is that we support visitation with their parents in prison. We have a monthly caregiver support group. You know, we have quarterly family fellowship where all the families get together so that they know, you know, they're not alone in this. There's other kids that just like them. So, you know, they kind of create their own fellowship, their friendship with other kids that have parents incarcerated. You know, we have a scholarship fund where we actually give out scholarships to kids that want to go to college, and it's renewed for 3 years, long as they make the certain GPA. So they continues to get the money for the scholarship fund. But one of the important things that one of the important groups that we have collaborated with and partnered with is called CRUSH. CRUSH meaning Kids Rising Up Through Support and Healing. And it's a curriculum where we help kids with social and emotional things like that from pre-K to 12th grade, you know, and we also have trained up to 400 educators across the state of Kentucky virtually during COVID to help them identify kids that have parents that's incarcerated. Why was the Wanda Joyce Robinson Foundation started? Well, like I said, I spent 10 years in federal prison, and I left two young boys to fend for themselves, you know, without having the right support and the right mentors and the right people around them. You know, statistics say that 8 out of 10 kids probably will go down the same route that their parents went down. And they had the right support group. So I'm looking around while I was incarcerated, like how many other kids are left out there to fend for themselves while their fathers are here with me or their mothers incarcerated. So we ended up getting out, and I actually said, Amy, like, let's start this Wanda Joyce Robinson Foundation, you know, and it's so we started, and we start serving 300 kids, you know. But I really want to thank the Kentucky Youth Advocate people for the 2021 data book, because it's really a major thing with racial disparity, generational incarceration, which is really real because my father was incarcerated, I was incarcerated, and my two younger brothers is incarcerated, you know, and that's a generational curse. But with my kids, the generational curse stops. So with that being said, with them having the right support group and the right people around them, my oldest son has graduated from Eastern Kentucky with a criminal justice degree. And most of y'all might not know that my youngest son plays football for the University of Kentucky, you know, and I'm super blessed and super grateful for all the people that stuck around them and supported them through the whole thing. Now, our thing is really about community and family, you know, and we really are on the ground with the communities and the family. We're not just talking about it, we actually doing the work. You know, we do home visits with kids. We're making sure the kids get extracurricular activities to make sure that they stay active. And also we kind of make sure they get that emotional support, and that so they can have the right mind and be able to like, hey, I can do this. I can make it regardless of my situation at home. Yes, I might grow up in poverty, but I have people that really care about me, you know, and poverty really starts is because let's look at the judicial system, how it all goes together. Because if your parents are incarcerated, your dad's incarcerated, you leaving one parent to take care of other kids at home, and they might not make enough money. And like my situation, when I got out, I wasn't allowed to get a regular job. I had to check the box, and no gym would hire me because I applied to every gym in Lexington, and all gyms said no. So I had to go work a low-paying job, which is $7.50 an hour, and I had enough just to maybe put food on the table and pay a few bills. And what really hit me is that my youngest son, which is Wandell, he came to me when I got out on Christmas and asked me, what do you got for me for Christmas? And I told him I didn't have nothing. The only thing he wanted was a baseball bat. And I couldn't provide the baseball bat for him. So if I didn't have the right mindset and know that I had a plan, and I know that me staying out versus me going back to do what I thought that was right, going back to the streets or doing whatever I was doing, then, where would he be at? So I actually told him, I don't have it, So my thing is now I own my own gym and I can do my own thing, but I also show other kids and other people that's incarcerated that you can still make it. You can still be there for your family. You can still do certain things. You all have a gift, but are you willing to tap into that gift and do what you need to do so you can stay home and be there for your kids and show them that there's a man at home, there's a mom at home, and give them that emotional, and that social support every single day that they need, and not go look for it from somewhere else out in the streets, and not have your kids in some foster care or foster home with someone that don't know them, and so now we have met with senators. We have met with the president of the Senate, Stivers. We sat down. Now we are actually in the talk of creating a Bill of Rights for kids, for the kids that don't have a voice, the kids that need to be heard, and be able to identify with those kids that have incarcerated parents. Because as we look at Kentucky's numbers, we're third in the nation with parents incarcerated. With children that have parents incarcerated. That's like 144,000 kids that have parents incarcerated. That's a crazy number to look at how small Kentucky is, and that's what the Wanda Joyce Robinson Foundation really does. And we couldn't really do the things that we do without our community and the people around us that's helping us. And these numbers that the Youth Kentucky Advocate showed, and I'm a firm believer that, men lie, women lie, but numbers don't lie, and I'm a firm believer also, if you know and not do, it's like not knowing at all. So if you know it, you don't do something about it, then what's the use of knowing it? So I knew the numbers and I know the data, but me and my team, we get on the grounds and we do something about it instead of just crying and complaining about, why our kids are falling through the cracks and why our education is not up to par. Why these kids only think they can be is rappers, street thugs, and basketball players. No, you can be an author, you can be an entrepreneur, you can be all these other things, but if you're not exposed to it, how you ever know if you don't ever see it? So I really want to thank the Kentucky Youth Advocate for having me on here, and allow me to share what the Wanda Joyce Robinson Foundation does. And I couldn't really do none of this without my team, Amy, and the rest of our board.
Thank you so much, Dale. Shamitha, no pressure, but you're the benediction. You're the individual that's going to bring all this together. So take it away.
Oh boy, here we go. So, my name is Shamitha Kuppala, and I am a high schooler in Oldham County. So first off, I want to really thank everybody who's spoken before me for the opportunity to be here and to hear you speak, because there have just been such insightful, empowering things said here today. And honestly, gives me so much hope for my generation and generations after me as young people. So anyway, I'm here to share some of my thoughts on child health understandings in Kentucky. And many of you are already aware of the importance of collecting and sharing the data that we found around child well-being and race disparities, which is, of course, why you're here. But for those of you that may be unconvinced or that have friends or coworkers that are, still kind of stubborn and you're trying to bring them on board, the significance of this data lies in one key fact, I would say, and that is that kids count. So every single Kentuckian experiences childhood, of course, and we can't let their potentials be diminished by externalities like location, like poor healthcare or institutional inequities or race. Now, you're all intelligent people here. You know that individuals and children of color are faced with more significant barriers to housing, financial success, education at all levels, healthcare, employment, and ultimately a bright future. And these disproportionate obstacles create a cycle. A child who's prevented from succeeding in elementary school because of poor food access, for example, will struggle throughout their education system, and they likely won't attain higher education. And from there, they won't be able to achieve a well-paying job to afford nutrition and healthcare for their children. And from there, the vicious cycle just repeats. Now, I've seen my friends, family, school, and community affected by these circumstances. I've been affected by some of these institutionalized barriers myself. And the problem isn't just a tangible one either, as I've seen personally. These negatively impacted children are often ultimately unable to make friends, to feel self-confident, and to maintain strong mental and emotional health. So, for the sake of the Commonwealth that we all love so very much, the one that we and all the kids that we represent call home, I say, let's make a change. By sharing critical kids count data, we can use our voices and our abilities, powers, positions to uplift those overlooked groups and to give them the recognition that will hopefully develop their voices someday. So let's collectively learn, grow, and share information about child health and racial disparities in Kentucky. I personally want to urge each person tuning in today to visit kyyouth.org to read the data book, review child health data from your county, and to share information with peers and leaders. And finally, to ask legislators about how the decisions that they make are going to push data in the right direction for all kids in your community and in mine. So please go check that out right now or as soon as you get a chance, because as you all know, what we measure, we can change. So thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you all so much. I don't think I'm going to embarrass him, but I got a note from Ryan that said, every one of these speakers is lights out. Amen, Ryan. Thank you so much for joining us. How do we conclude this? Well, maybe the Spanish philosopher Jose Ortega Gasset gives us the best way to leave. He writes, "Tell me what you pay attention to, and I will tell you who you are." So the question today is, will Kentucky, will our state leaders, and will you pay attention to the issues raised in the 2021 Kids Count book around a systemic and historic pattern of racial disparities? Whether we pay attention to that or whether we ignore it will tell us a whole lot about who we are as a Commonwealth. Thanks for joining us today, and we're counting on you to dig into the data and make those calls for action on behalf of Kentucky's kids. Have a good rest of your day.